Welcome to the Matt Dan Toddcast. I'm your host, Matt, but you can call me Matt Dan Todd for short. Happy Orthodox Star Wars Day, everyone. Now, what do I mean by Orthodox Star Wars Day? Well, it's a lot like Easter, right? There once was a time where the whole church celebrated Easter Sunday on the same day, which was the first Sunday after the first full moon to follow the vernal equinox. And this story is probably much more complex than this, but after some disagreements between the Orthodox and Catholic streams of the church, they started following different formulas for when to celebrate Easter. And the Orthodox churches continue to follow the original formula, the first full moon to follow the vernal equinox, and the Catholic Church and ultimately Protestant churches as well did not. And although the dates do occasionally overlap, these different church traditions generally observe Easter Sunday on two different dates. Now, before we go too far into this, please realize that I am not equating Star Wars celebrations with the highest of holy days in the Christian calendar. But here's the connection that has led me to refer to May 25th as Orthodox Star Wars Day. You see, Star Wars premiered on May 25th, 1977. For many of us who continued our Star Wars fandom into the 1980s and 90s, we recognize that day. There were certainly years when I would make sure to wear my Chewbacca t-shirt and watch A New Hope in quiet recognition of this day long remembered, because May 25th was Star Wars Day. But then somehow, some way, with the advent of Facebook and other social media platforms, people started sharing this punny phrase on May the 4th. Happy Star Wars Day. May the 4th be with you. And it stuck around. And then it gained popularity. And I remember it was kind of a big deal when StarWars.com, the official website of the Star Wars saga, started releasing images recognizing Star Wars Day on May 4th. But what about May 25th? The original Star Wars Day. Isn't that still Star Wars Day? And I think it's altogether fitting that we conclude this month-long focus on Star Wars with a conversation with probably the two biggest Star Wars fans I've known for a long time. A long time. I met Dan and Will in Tennessee's Fair Eastern Mountains while we were students at Milligan College. Go Buffs. They were some of the biggest Star Wars fans I knew, and they still are. They might even be bigger fans than I am. And if you know me at all, or even a little bit of me, you know that that's saying something, right? Our Star Wars fandom all came to a head at Milligan's Wonderful Wednesday celebration in 1997. Now, what is Wonderful Wednesday? Well, I'm happy to tell you. It's a day when classes are canceled for the day, and there's basically a carnival that pops up, and the whole campus just becomes this one festive activity for the day. They host a special breakfast, and there's all kinds of games and other activities for students and faculty all throughout campus, all throughout the day. It's pretty wonderful, right? It's certainly a highlight of the Milligan experience, along with, humanities, chapel services, and the tradition of getting thrown into Buffalo Creek. In 1997, George Lucas released the special editions of Star Wars on the big screen, and there was this resurgence of Star Wars mania on campus. It was glorious. So it was only natural that Wonderful Wednesday would have a Star Wars theme. Now, Will, I remember, was on the planning committee for that year's Wonderful Wednesday, and I'm sure he was in heaven as he helped. I was made for this moment right here. So I was excited to fill out the trivia sheet and submit my entry. And then that evening, the school rented out the local drive-in, and we all gathered together to watch the special edition of A New Hope on the big, big, big screen. But before that happened, we were all there, and the committee chairs for Wonderful Wednesday found me and told me that I had the highest score on the trivia contest. Pretty cool, right? I mean, I shouldn't have been that surprised, but I was. There was a small catch, though. Someone else had the same score, and it was Dan. And that really wasn't a surprise either. He knew Star Wars backwards and forwards. So it all came down to a final showdown. A last battle, you could say. A mano a mano, no holds barred grudge match to the death to determine who would reign supreme as the ultimate Star Wars fan on the Milligan College campus. They asked the two of us a series of questions in person, and we both got the same amount of questions right. And then they asked us even more questions. And, well, here's where the details get a little fuzzy, honestly. Dan might say that he won. I might say that I won. I think we really wound up with a tie. And I wound up going home with a new portable CD player that I used for years. And I think Dan went home with a model kit of a Star Destroyer. I kind of think that he wound up with the cooler prize, honestly. But I digress. It's always a lot of fun talking Star Wars with Dan and Will. We've been doing it for years via chat, social media chat, but I really hadn't had the opportunity to talk to them in person or virtually face to face in a really long time. And so this conversation was a real special treat for me. And I hope it is for you too. So I want to thank you, Dan and Will, for joining me today. I want to go ahead and say that when I first started thinking about this, not too long ago, realizing that May was coming up and I needed to talk Star Wars, that you two were some of the first people that I thought of from our experience at Milligan, and even afterwards, just the conversations we've had over the years. So thank you for joining me and sharing your a hint of your wealth of knowledge. We're not going to have enough time to dig too deep, right? That would have to be a whole other podcast in and of itself, right? Which maybe we should talk about someday. But let's see how this goes first, right?
I got time.
So thanks again, Will and Dan, for joining me. Let's give everyone that's listening just a little bit about yourself. Dan, would you mind going first? Just kind of telling us who you are.
Thanks, Matt, for having us. My name is Dan Ellis, and as you mentioned, we're all Milligan students. We all graduated from there, and I was born 14 months before A New Hope. So it's always been right there on the ether for me. Always been in the zeitgeist, the Dan Ellis zeitgeist, and I have just always enjoyed it. They've made it more difficult for me over the last 10 years or so, but that's probably just because I'm a grumpy older person now. From Ohio, living here in Columbus, Ohio, and ready to talk Star Wars.
Cool. Thanks, Dan. And I get it about the grumpy old man. And Will?
So I'm Will Oates, also a Milligan guy. These guys were a year or so ahead of me, or a year and a half or so, but age-wise, about in the same ballpark. I teach middle schoolers up in Northwest Indiana, and I'm always down for talking Star Wars, so I'm excited for this. I'm probably not quite as grumpy about the newer stuff, but I get the arguments, I understand, but I kind of refuse to let that taint my love of the old ones. But I'm ready to talk. Let's do it.
Bless you for teaching middle schoolers. Just want to say that.
You either love them or you don't.
I'm glad you love them more than you don't. So that's great. Because if not, you're in the wrong profession,
right?
For sure. So again, thanks again, guys, for joining me today. I'm excited to hear what you guys have to say. So let's go ahead and talk Star Wars. All right. This is the one that Will, you're the person that actually explained this challenge to me like 10 years ago when I talked about choosing your favorite Star Wars episode. And you said, that's like choosing your favorite kid. Like, I don't think I can do that, or at least publicly, I don't think I can do that. Right. So, but I'm going to ask you now. And so we'll go ahead and start with you, Will.
Okay.
What's your favorite episode and why?
I'm impressed you remember that, because I have no recollection of that. But that sounds like something I would say.
I just remember all of the really obscure things, right? I don't remember the important things. I remember
right.
Quotes like
and
that.
I'm sure there's some weird ones I probably remember. Yeah. To pick, I kind of feel the same way. Like, I went to the 40th anniversary of Jedi on Friday, took the family. That was the first one I saw in the theater. So that one, from that perspective, has kind of a special place in my heart, just because it was the first one I saw on the big screen. My dad took us up to this 70 millimeter theater, blah, 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 and just made a big deal of it. But I've always been a sucker when it comes to movies for the cliffhanger ending. So Empire's always been my favorite. A New Hope is pure popcorn, like just action movie, sci-fi fun. Like, and they're a virtual tie, don't get me wrong. But Jedi, I like when the heroes, Empire, excuse me. I love movies where the heroes are on the ropes. I always feel that it's more realistic, even though it's sci-fi, like, hey, it's not, every day is not going to go, hey, we blew up the Death Star, let's get a first place medal. And, so that's kind of where that sticks for me, because it's always been, I like that. Unfortunately, the third part isn't always like the redemption or the satisfying end. I just think it's hard to nail that third act. That being said, Jedi's great. Like, don't get me wrong, I had a blast going taking the kids last weekend. But yeah, it's always been Empire for me. I'm a sucker for the Hoth battle. That's a big part of it. I just love that whole from the beginning till the end of the battle. So yeah, so that would probably be it for me. I do have to admit, we mentioned newer stuff. Rogue One has snuck up there with those three for me. Like, I'm a Rogue One guy too. I don't know how it fits. I go back and forth, but it's in the mix for just a great Star Wars movie. But we may get there later. But yeah, Empire always takes the cake.
Well, yeah, I was just telling Matt, Will, that man is so hard, because it is between Empire and between A New Hope. And I think it changes hourly sometimes for me. But I mean, yeah, well, Hoth is they're my favorite scenes. Empire is better directed. It is better written by Mr. Kasdan. And I love that. The two things that just send me toward A New Hope often is that you lose the ensemble, they get split up, and I miss that. And it's not a complete movie. I'm not a cliffhanger guy. I want it, and yeah, you're right. Return of the Jedi, even with the murder bears, they stuck the landing, they got it done. Loved, enjoyed that. But I tend to think I move more toward A New Hope, just because I love that it finishes and that you get all three together for a lot longer than any other movie, even after them showing up in three new ones. It was just having those guys together was fun. So yeah, it's hard, but that's yeah.
So one thing to point out that you both say about Empire, one thing is probably worth mentioning is that's the one that George Lucas felt like he needed to update the least when he did the special editions, right? There's a lot that was added in A New Hope. Some of it was good, some of it not so good. Jedi, I'm not sure if I can think of a scene that I agree with him adding to for Jedi. And Empire Strikes Back was the least that he felt the need to change. And the director even kind of saw that as a badge of honor. And I think that's right. That he kind of is, right? Since I ask everyone, I probably should pick one for myself, right?
Yeah.
So I I have a lot of memories, a lot of fond memories of going to see Return of the Jedi. That was a big deal for me. You know, we spent 3 years with friends trying to figure out what was going to happen to Han Solo, you know, and how was this going to end? And it was a big deal. There was a neighbor friend of mine who always seemed to have the inside scoop about Star Wars, and so like it was a big deal to me that I went to see it before him, and then I went to see it with him too. But I would be like, I knew that that was happening, you know, that kind of thing. So that there's a great, you know, a heartfelt memory with that. And Empire Strikes Back was the first Star Wars movie I went to see in the theater. My aunt and uncle took me. They were scared I was going to be worried. They were concerned I was going to be scared about, you know, the duels and stuff like that, the battles. And so I remember standing in line, and my uncle Don explained to me what a lightsaber was going to sound like, and that it was. I was like, yeah, I know all of that. But I get it. I got it now. I get the concern. And so there, you know, in high school, I would always say that was my favorite, because it wasn't anyone else's favorite at the time. And I'm contrarian enough that I didn't want to just pick the popular film. There's a lot of character development in Empire Strikes Back, and it is slower. My dad always would say to me, but the bad guys are winning at the end. I was like, yeah, sometimes that's life too. The bad guys, at least in the short term, the bad guys are winning at the end. So, you know, Empire Strikes Back was what I would say was my favorite, but I still kind of go back to A New Hope. But I think it's as much the memories that it evokes, you know, the love that I like. I would watch it at my grandparents all the time, and I would someone would come in and say something. Shh, this is my favorite part. Every part was my favorite part. It didn't matter. Every part was my favorite part. But in looking back with more of a critical eye, I still believe that the final battle, that last 20 minutes, is probably some of the finest film storytelling, period. And so it's really hard for me not to just go back to there. Not that you guys are wrong. I completely agree 100%. Everyone I've asked, I agree with their reasoning and their arguments. But I still have to keep going back to A New Hope, I think. So,
well, they were so far advanced in their special effects on that final space battle. I mean, they were hitting points of special effects that other groups weren't hitting until the late 80s.
Yeah. Well, and you can, and with the editing, you can tell with the rest of them that it wasn't the same person doing the editing, because it was just so well done. And I think that's missed in the rest of any George Lucas related property, honestly. So who's your favorite character? Here, that's the first part. Second part that I kind of wonder, because you know, there's 40 plus years of movies here of having a favorite. Has it always been the favorite? Has this character always been your favorite, or has it changed over the years? And why is it Chewbacca?
I remember that being your favorite, actually.
Yeah.
Yep.
Love him. Good. Well,
okay. Well, I would say it's probably changed. Let me take that back. I probably still have the same favorite character, but as the movies have progressed, and I'll include the new ones and the prequels and some of the TV shows, which again I know we're maybe going to discuss. I mean, Han Solo has always been my guy. I've always liked a guy who's a little gray, and maybe that's why I like Empire too. You know, it's not all black and white. Han Solo was never black and white. Again, TV show. I'm annoyed. Again, we're going into other territory. I enjoyed the Mando at first, but when basically he became a babysitter and there was no black and white in him bounty hunter, like honestly, I'm losing interest in that series. The last series I thought was pretty weak. But Han is great, but he doesn't develop as much as I would like. You know, I mean, in the movies, the original trilogy, he does. I've come to appreciate Obi-Wan more. I think he's a character between the Clone Wars cartoons and the Obi-Wan series they've done a little more. They've made him more interesting to me. And I've always thought Obi-Wan was cool, but he had so little screen time, and he gets killed at New Hope, and then he just pops back in. And again, Han's definitely my favorite, but I'm an R2 guy because I don't think they would have made it without R2. Like, you know, he's got no force abilities, but he bails Luke out time and time again. He's opening doors for him that they couldn't get through. You know, Han Solo tries to hotwire the thing because R2 can't open it, and he screws it up. Like, you know, R2's the glue, he's the duct tape that holds the Star Wars universe together. But Han Solo is cool as the other side of the pillow. That's why the worst, you know, I can, you know, throw away the blinking Ewoks and some of that other garbage, but, you know, the Han shooting first, I know that's the classic debate, but, you know, that's what made him so cool to me as a kid. Not because, oh, he's a murderer, but no, because he's cool. He's the coolest guy in the galaxy. You know, and that's, I'm a Han Solo guy. Yeah.
And he was a scoundrel, right? And scoundrels sometimes would shoot first. I get it.
Right.
So.
And as a kid, you know, as a kid, it didn't encourage me to shoot people or throw stuff at their backs. It wasn't one of those like, oh no, kids are going to be screwed up because of this. No, man, I just wanted to dress like that guy. I had a fur coat that had the wool on it, or the fur on it, or the hood. I wore that to church in the wintertime. I totally thought I was Han Solo. I didn't look anything like him, but I was like, man, I wanted that Hoth coat. I wanted that one they put out a few years ago that was $200 or whatever, but it wasn't in the budget. But yeah, Han's my guy.
So if anyone's listening and has an extra $200 sitting around, I will connect you with Will, and we'll get those taken care of.
If anybody wants to send me one of those, I can make a video and review it, since it's 3 years old now or whatever it is. But I'm sure there's no YouTube videos out there critiquing it yet, but I'll definitely do it again.
Okay.
Even a used one, I don't care. Goodwill.
And Dan?
Yeah. Well, there's definitely been an evolution of consideration around favorite from when you were a kid to now. When I was a kid, it wasn't choosing a favorite character. It was a career choice. Who were you going to be? And I remember having conversations with my kids, you know, or with my friends. And are you Luke and you get the cool powers, or are you Han and you're cool and you get the girl? You know, so which do you want? And honestly, that initial grasp of character hasn't changed for me, but it just like Will, it does come down to Han. He thinks differently than everybody else in the room. Even when he becomes more of a supporter of the cause, he's still just got that moment of, how am I going to get out of this? And he brings everyone else along, but it's very much scrabble and fish out of water. You can see why Spielberg looked at him and said, "That's my Indiana Jones," because it's a very similar character in terms of just resilient and able to get out of things, and that's what's fun about him.
I think too, like, I could never see myself as Luke. Like, I was never the hero or anything. I wasn't the jock. I wasn't the athlete. But I might have been able to do a little bit of the Han Solo stuff. Like, I might have been able to pull that off. So, like you said, who are you going to be? Yeah, that's a big part of it. I got to throw an honorable mention out there to Wedge Antilles. I'm like, he's just a guy doing his job. You know, he's blowing stuff up, and you know. So I kind of like the regular guy too. I think that was a little bit of it. That's interesting. You brought up that point. So,
well, that was originally okay. I'm sure it was Luke and Han. It was always a battle about Luke and Han when I was younger, and then growing up to be the contrarian that I was, or maybe still am. I don't know. Wedge became my. This says my meeting will end in 10 minutes. So we might have to start back up in just a few minutes, right? I can schedule another meeting. Sorry about that. I didn't realize there was just a time limit on these. I'm going to edit this part out, right? Yeah. So, so anyway, Wedge was, I was contrarian enough that I didn't want to like who everyone else liked. And so I thought Wedge, you know, he went through all those major battles and he survived, right? So I want to like him. He's pretty cool. Yeah. But I like your point that, you know, he just did his job and just put his head down and did his job. It's another story about how Chewbacca took the lead, but he's still probably my favorite character, and especially after hearing, you know, finding out about how Peter Mayhew kind of took that and used his role and his influence to do good with a lot of people. And so that makes him even more endearing to me, right?
Definitely.
So is there a favorite quote that you have from the series?
Oh, this one's going to be weird. And it's not even really the line. It's in The Force Awakens. And there are a couple of things that happen that really underline Han and Chewie's friendship
Mhm.
that I just absolutely adored in it. And they really shined a light on Chewie in that movie more than I think any of the other movies. And the part where they come in from the cold, or no, they're sneaking around, looking around, and Chewie says something, and Han just looks up at him and says, "Oh, really? You're cold?" Like that, I love that moment. And then when they go into a place, they got to go back outside. Han or Chewie comes up behind Han and has his coat, and he taps him on the back and holds the coat out to him. And there's just that moment of taking care of each other and knowing each other so well. I loved that.
Yeah,
that was great.
that's quite an observation there. And I think I've missed that. So yeah, good catch. Will, do you have a favorite quote?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I tend to like when I like a movie quote or a quote from something, it's something I quote a lot or try and work into conversation. And Star Wars, I don't, with other Star Wars fans, it lends itself. It's more some of the dialogue, I guess, kind of like Dan saying. Like, I love, Carrie Fisher and, just the snarky responses. She talks back to Tarkin. She talks back to Vader. I just as soon kiss a Wookiee. I didn't expect to see you holding Vader's leash. Right. Just like, and just knowing the background and how young she was and just the confidence she had. I mean, you're working with Peter Cushing and these kind of classic guys and, and just having just the delivery of that was great. Those types of responses, and anybody who could talk back to Vader in the movies always, I'm like, there's got to be something behind that. How come Boba Fett can just talk back to him or somebody can and Vader just, if he didn't care for you, he'd just choke you, obviously. So anybody who had the ability or the minerals to talk back to Vader. Again, it's just, there's so many little things like that in the movies. And I think that's what I love about them is those little details that, it's just a kind of a dumb, funny moment, but it's like, there's a little more to that, especially the stuff with Vader. My favorite, I remember, I grew up watching everything on VHS, and this isn't necessarily a quote, but getting the letterbox, finally, the VHS letterbox, and just stuff I hadn't seen. I'll never forget. I can't remember who Vader. I think it's after they lose the Falcon in the asteroid field, and you see two guys standing off in the side, two of the Imperial officers or lackeys or whatever, and Vader's choking the guy, and they're kind of like looking at like, what the heck's going on? And as soon as Vader starts to turn, they scuttle off. Like, we shouldn't be standing here, but we want to know what's going on. Just, I don't know, like, just little things like that in the dialogue in the movies is what makes them so cool. It's like somebody thought to have these guys eavesdropping on Darth Vader, but they knew better than to stick around too long. So again, that's not a quote thing, but yeah, probably the Carrie Fisher stuff. And then, it just it's so great. How she was able to work with those heavy-handed guys and just, keep that snarky attitude. So
hold her own for sure. Yeah.
I don't know. I just think Leia and Boba couldn't read the room. I feel like those are the friends. They're like Kramer, where they just say whatever comes to their mind. That's the only theory I could come up with, that they would talk to Vader like that.
That's true. Yeah.
I mean, if we knew she was his daughter earlier, you could understand, because my daughter was talking to me like that the other day, and but they didn't know at that point. So
right.
Hey, Dad.
So I want to go back about the letterbox, mentioning the letterbox edition, finally getting that and seeing, like, I remember watching that and thinking my eyes I've been watching through like foggy glasses forever. And then all of a sudden my eyes were just wide open. And there's a scene, the who's scruffy looking scene, where then she eventually says, well, I guess you don't know everything about women yet, and kisses him. And 3PO, you see him walk up on the side that's not in the TV edit, and he kind of looks like, what are you going to do about that? And it's just, it's hilarious. And it's,
I don't know if I've ever caught that.
He comes running up fast, does a double take, and then looks at Han like, exactly. That is awesome.
The letterbox was,
oh my gosh, that letterbox,
life-changing.
I remember being at Milligan
Yeah.
and it was coming out. They were talking about it, and I was like, "Big deal. What's Letterbox?"
Uh-huh.
And then I found on this thing called the internet, I found a list of things that you don't see when you watch the modified for TV version, and I
Uh-huh.
couldn't believe how much you like when Luke says they're sand people, all right, there are two of them now. You never saw them
Yeah.
until you got the letterbox,
Yeah.
and yeah, that was just mind blowing to me.
Yeah. It's crazy. And now, fortunately, with the new dimension, new relatively, I mean, what, it's been 20 years at least since
Yeah.
they've been like this, but the
Huh.
new quote dimensions of TV screens, you don't have to worry about letterboxing as much. And so
Yeah.
you can get their full vision all
Yep.
the time. Pretty crazy what we've seen, change over the
Yeah.
years, right? So, but that would probably be another episode for another time to talk about, right?
Yeah.
I was especially thinking when I was thinking of this question, and I was thinking especially about the dark times between the original trilogy and the prequel trilogy release. But there have been a lot of books written since then. But I'm just curious, did you read many of the books or of the comic books or anything like that?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
Are there any that come to mind? Any that stick out?
oh yeah. Well, first of all, the in the 90s, the only thing we had was the Timothy Zahn
Yeah.
trilogy,
Yeah.
which I still think is amazing. He just captured the feel of the movies better than anybody ever has. And then Kevin J. Anderson's trilogy with the Jedi Academy,
Hmm.
and I really enjoyed those. It was I stuck with it. I was tenacious. I think I read everything. When Lucas came up with their own publishing company and they started their own line, and it followed the kids, that I was starting to get a little, it wasn't working as well. The quality wasn't there in my mind. But I read it all. Kind of a side note, I was kind of rolling my eyes when Disney, the reaction to Disney saying, okay, the only thing that's canon right now are the six movies and the Clone Wars. And these Dark Horse comic fans and these novel fans, they were all up in arms. And I could find three or four different places where Lucas said, none of that is canon. It's just the movies. And that was before Clone Wars. So it was interesting. They were fun, but they never had the weight of the movies for me.
And I definitely did the Zahn stuff, the early Zahn stuff, the Kevin J. Anderson, some of the standalone books I read. And I remember thinking some of those were varying quality. I'd have to reread them again. I was happy I scored the comic version of the Zahn trilogy up at C2E2 in Chicago one time. It was out of print and somebody had it dirt cheap. And I was like, oh, this is cool. So that was fun, when you don't have time to read the entire novels over. I've done more of the recent release of the comic stuff. Several guys have written them, but I think it was the original one. And then they've done some. One was set between New Hope and Empire, and then one was one prior. I can't remember, but they kind of were in the storyline of the within the original trilogy. So I really enjoyed those because again, I'm kind of a sucker. Like I want to know what those guys were doing. I didn't read a lot of the Rogue Squadron books, but I thought that's great. Like those guys were flying missions. And again, I think that's why I mentioned Rogue One earlier. Like that's some of the stuff those guys were up to at that time. And I just find those characters intriguing. Like, yeah, the heroes are cool, the Force users are cool, but really what's making this thing work down the road is you got to have these other guys, sitting at a computer terminal and flying the X-Wings and doing this. So I got into that stuff. And the comic books kind of, other than the Vader series, kind of flesh out a little bit of that. And I've read a few of the others, but those were the standout ones. So that's what I kind of keep up with now. There's a few books I'd like to check out. I've heard good things about here and there, but at this stage in my life, it's kind of hard. I don't have a lot of time to read what I'm supposed to read, let alone read for pleasure. So
Priorities. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I think this kind of can lead in to the next question I was thinking about the series, especially knowing that Ahsoka is coming out, and they, in the trailer, it was a big deal, or at least it was a big deal to me. when they said that there's an heir to the empire, which is an
Yeah.
obvious reference to the Zahn trilogy. So I am curious, how much of the TV series have you watched? All the way back to Clone Wars, if you want to include Clone Wars. You haven't seen Ahsoka yet because it hasn't come out. And if you have, you need to send me the link. Right. But just curious what you've seen and what you think about them.
Most of the stuff, I keep stalling out on Rebels for some reason. I'm enjoying it, but I keep stalling out on it, and I don't know why. And with Ahsoka coming out, I know there's a lot of tie-ins. Ahsoka and Thrawn and some of those characters are in there. So I enjoyed the Clone Wars. The Clone Wars movie was pretty lame, but the actual series, I love the fact that they did. It seemed like they did like 2 or 3 episode like arcs, which I think were forced them to write a nice little story. It gave them a time to develop a little bit more. Again, it's been a while, and I remember they focused on, there was one where it was just some of the bounty hunters, and it wasn't always focused on Anakin and Obi-Wan. Which I thought was cool. I remember Plo Koon had his own little arc and that kind of thing. I haven't seen the Bad Batch. That's one I've heard good things about, but I haven't watched. And then of course all the live action I've checked out, and I've enjoyed most of those. I'm kind of one more Star Wars is. I don't want it to be oversaturated, but I kind of mentioned earlier my thoughts on the last season of Mando. I thought it was probably the weakest, but the Ahsoka trailer, I'm pretty psyched because. Even if they spin off some version of Zahn's trilogy or I don't know where they're going to go with it, but I'm like, that could be cool. There were some great ideas in there, and Thrawn's a great bad guy. And I think, if he can, unite the remnants of the Empire or whatever, I don't know where they're going with that, but yeah, all in all, I've enjoyed them to some extent. Obi-Wan was probably the standout for me, and the first 2 Mando seasons were a lot of fun. But yeah, I don't think I watched The Resistance. My kids did, but I wasn't too into that, so it looked cheesy. So yeah.
It's interesting you mentioned that about Rebels, because I've had the same issue with Rebels, and even when Rebels first came out, there were a few things that I saw in the first few episodes. I was like, these people get it, they understand. They're coming from the same perspective that I did, wanting to see these stories, but they're throwing in these things that only Star Wars geeks would catch, right? And so and it's still there even. I'm finally in season 2, and it's still there even in season 2, but it's for some reason I just struggle with that one too. But so I get it, but I've really enjoyed it. I just can't.
It's an odd thing. I don't know.
It's so weird.
Yeah, the other day they were. I was watching when they were hijacking Y-wings. I'm like, those are the Macquarie, concept art Y-wings, and I was like all excited about it. So all those great nods are in there. But yeah, again, there's something that. I don't know if it's just my season of life or what, but
probably we're getting old anyway.
Yeah, I got to stay awake long enough to watch it.
I felt that the Clone Wars were a slog. I made it through. I tried an episode of the Bad Batch, and I was just like, this feels like more Clone Wars. I think I'm done. I actually really enjoyed the Rebels, and I think it was because it focused on a tight group of characters that they were able to build
an ensemble there. Yeah, right. For sure.
And you couldn't do that with Clone Wars just with the way it was established.
Right.
Just a huge map of characters. And so I had a lot of fun with that. I'm with you, Will, on the recent Mandalorian. I don't know why I didn't see it earlier, but all of a sudden it's like, wait a minute, Mandalorian's a Trojan horse to bring all these Clone Wars characters to the real screen. And I don't know how I feel about that yet. I am really excited about Ahsoka just because I love Rosario Dawson. She's amazing. And she's great as the character when she's shown up. But yeah, I definitely feel like we shouldn't have been surprised with Filoni. I mean, he show ran both Clone Wars and Rebels. But yeah, I mean, it's been fun. I enjoyed Andor. I love. I thought it needed to move a little quicker at the beginning, but once it did get moving, I thought it was really impressive. It was gritty, and I'm still burned out by lightsabers since the prequels. And to have a show without a lightsaber, I was loving every minute of it. Just real people dealing with the Empire, and that was really something. And they really kicked it in. The level of acting comparatively was really something. I really had a good time with that.
So what do you guys think about the Book of Boba Fett?
Oh gosh,
Well,
what a slog. And I'll tell you, my issue with the Book of Boba Fett is a general writing issue. When you are going to flashback a lot,
Mm-hmm.
there's no momentum, and it just tires me out. I thought the idea of him kind of a Native American connection with the Sand People and
Yes,
finding a
wolves.
second life,
Right.
yeah, that was a cool idea. Plus, I would but just in flashback form, I got bored. And those Coruscant rejects living in town, they didn't belong in
the
Tatooine.
hot rodders,
Yeah, they didn't look
they
like
had the bikes.
Tatooine. They were out of place. I think it was a bad decision. Yeah, so generally speaking, I'll never revisit Boba Fett. I don't know what they were thinking.
I had a couple other issues. Number one, I felt like Tamir Morrison maybe could have gotten a little better shape for the role. Like I remember when Hamill was coming back and he worked out a little bit, and like he kind of was like Boba Dad. I'm like, if I were to see that, I'll go put a Boba Fett outfit on and go look at myself in the mirror. So that was kind of a minor complaint, but I also felt like they cheapened the character. He kind of became Boba Fett the Benevolent. I remember him letting people off the hook. I'm like, that's not the Boba Fett that I've seen or felt like how Boba Fett would act. He's supposed to be a crime boss, and I had some issues with that too. I kind of thought like, and I get this is it can't be super dark. It's a family friendly show, but I don't know. I thought he let a few people off the hook. And they needed more Danny Trejo. That's all. I love Danny Trejo. So Danny Trejo, Rancor Wrangler would be a great show. I'd be held down for that.
I feel like they keep going back to this well that has run dry already, like in the books and the comics and things like that. They always, because we created this mysterious character with Boba Fett. We can't think of anything else to do. Let's bring back this mysterious character of Boba Fett and kill the mystery while you're doing it, right? Because there's nothing unknown about him now, right? I'm sure there is.
And Lucas did that to us 15, 20 years ago.
Yeah.
Because we're like, oh, we're going to learn the backstory of Boba Fett. And then by the time Attack of the Clones ends, I'm like, oh, I wish I didn't,
Yeah. Well, then going back to the special edition, I mean, they've like, well, let's throw in Boba Fett here in A New Hope. And like, I just never really, I thought Boba Fett, the Book of Boba Fett was a series we didn't need. Watching it confirmed my thoughts about it, to be honest. Now, when you mentioned the biker gang, as I was watching, as they came up, I was like, that's gotta be a reference to Lucas's desire to, his
American
love
graffiti.
of American graffiti and cars and hot rods and stuff. Like,
I thought about that too.
There's no way, because it just sticks out like a sore thumb, right? Yeah. But I think that whole series does, which is unfortunate, because I really like Ming Na too. I think she's great and she was great in that. I mean, for what she had, I think she's great in everything I've seen her in. But yeah, I
didn't mind the Boba Fett stuff when he was with Mando in season 2.
Yeah.
Oh,
that wasn't as irritating. I was like, okay, I could buy this, and he helped him out and they teamed up. All right, but yeah, like you said, the exposition, the backstory was just kind of unnecessary.
Yeah. So they say what, never meet your heroes because you'll be disappointed. It's kind of the same thing. Never get these backstories, right? Because you're going to be disappointed. It's never as imaginative and amazing as what you've been able to cook up in your mind for the last 40 years, right? So I get that there's an issue there, but which is why the prequels would always have they could have been the most amazing movies I ever saw. They would still be a disappointment to me, and the sequels probably the same thing, just because there's so much time to build up these stories in my mind and in my heart, that even if I were the one making the film, it probably still wouldn't have lived up to what I expected. Plus they had a different,
you do with your action figures in the backyard.
Yeah, exactly.
Way better than
exactly.
But there's also to your point, Matt, yeah, we built it up, but I think a lot of things that we're talking about are products of Lucas and other show tellers or showrunners not recognizing why they're special.
Yeah, that's a
I mean, we see hints of that after Empire happened. That was his last moment of financial concern,
mhm.
and we see Lucas kind of untethered. It's starting to become untethered, and you see some of the decisions. He kills off Boba with a silly jetpack, and we're
Yeah.
all just like, "What?" Yeah, he didn't know what he had there. And same with the prequels. He was so focused on Sinatra doing it my way that I just don't think he recognized what was special to us in moments.
He was so focused on if he could do it that he didn't ask if he should do it.
Right.
Throw a little Jurassic Park.
Jurassic Park, thank you.
But that's interesting. But I've had some people. I joined a Facebook group that was just a Star Wars collectors group, and then I have a younger teacher who's I'm the department head of social studies, and he's a prequel guy. He's just like he said something about Star Wars. I said, well, why did you say that? He's just like, well, those were my Star Wars movies. So
yeah.
I don't disagree with anything Dan says, and I agree. Like there's some problems there, but part of it might be a little bit of me get off my lawn kind of thing.
Yeah.
But this guy, this buddy I've got at school, he's like, yeah, but I love those movies because I grew up watching them, and I'm like, I can't argue that. If
Yeah.
you love them for that reason, as bad as there's bad movies I like that I know are bad, but I still like them. Not that these are that type of movie, but I just thought that's kind of interesting. And in the space book group, people say, "Oh, show off your collection," blah blah blah. And a lot of guys are vintage guys, but there's guys who they love collecting the '90s stuff and they love showing off, And nobody's got a huge Jar Jar collection or anything, but it's kind of heartwarming to me that they are into it and they do love that stuff as much as we're kind of like, yeah. I kind of say there's elements of it I enjoyed, and there's ideas that aren't fully fleshed out or could have been done better, in my opinion. But if these guys are into it and they love Star Wars, I'm kind of like, yeah, go for it, full bore. But it's interesting because for a while I didn't run into those people, probably because I hung out with people who were like me and were like,
who have taste. Yeah, no,
who have taste. Yeah, exactly. So
I get it,
I
especially
that was kind of interesting.
Especially talking to my son, 22 years old, and so he grew up with the prequels, right? For a long time, he would say that episode 2 was his favorite. And who are you? I've failed you, Aiden. I've failed
right.
you. That's what I wanted to say over and over. And actually, I did a few times. He has since changed his tune. But in talking with him and other parents who have kids his age, it's the Clone Wars that are like their Star Wars experience. And so when they released the concluding arc, a year or two ago, that was like the hype of when the prequels came out for us, right? And so it's been really interesting and eye-opening, kind of like the letterboxes, right? Kind of eye-opening to see how other generations do have a different perspective and love the series all the same, right? And so yeah, it's hard sometimes talking about episode 2, but if it gets you to love the story, then I guess I can't complain, right?
Agreed.
And I get sick of Star Wars trolls. It's like, go into like Star Wars Celebration or whatever. It's just a cool experience because I just, you stand in line for stuff and you're just talking Star Wars with anybody and everybody. Oh, you like that? Cool. I remember I got a guy, I won something for this celebration in Chicago. And
well, congratulations.
Like, man, I'm looking for somebody who'll get me this pin and I'll pay you to get it for me and blah, blah. I'm like, I'm not going to collect it. I think it was an Ahsoka pin or something. And he's like, I'll give you. I'm like, dude, just take it, pay it for it. And this kid was over the moon that I gave him this Ahsoka pin. He was willing to pay me $20-$30. I'm like, pay it forward sometime when you get a chance. And I hate the trolls because it's like, just enjoy the fandom with people. And even if you agree to disagree, and that's a society problem, we can do a whole podcast on that. But,
right.
But it was just cool. This kid was like, oh, just thank you so much. Thank you. It was something, and it was a cool experience for me and I was glad I could and I didn't try and take any money. I was glad I didn't after the fact. Cause I'm like, I made this kid's day, and some crusty old Star Wars guy,
And I love that. I think you got to be careful. I love to as objectively as possible, talk about the making and the writing of the movies
Uh-huh.
and how well it went. And I don't ever want that to be seen as me gatekeeping love of
Yeah.
Star Wars.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, because I could just say, yeah, there's nothing in Attack of the Clones that causes me to think that Padme would love Anakin.
Right.
Absolutely nothing that is
Right.
done honorably or anything to cause that. Looks like a pretty creepy relationship.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
and from a writing standpoint, but if somebody absolutely loves it, I'm not going to talk, screenwriting 101 with them. I'm going to just hear why they like it.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. It's funny you mentioned that because I've watched all of them with my kids, and recently we've watched episode 2, and when he's standing there, I killed them. I killed all of them. And Padme just kind of like, I mean, I realize you don't know what you're going to do. Like if someone would say that to you, you wouldn't really know what to do. But I turned to my daughter and said, if anyone ever comes to you and says that, that's a red flag, dear. You need to run away fast. So, Star Wars provides those teachable moments, even when you don't really expect them, right?
I'm yelling at the screen, Padme, jump in that skyhopper, get out of there.
Get out of there.
It's just, it's not happening. But,
Yeah.
oh well.
I realize we could keep talking forever.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I stopped myself a few times.
Yeah.
Rabbit trail.
So I really, I have loved talking about this with you, and maybe we should do this every May. I don't know. So thank you for doing this. One more thing I thought of when you were talking about we're not being we don't want to be gatekeepers about the Star Wars experience. I had that revelation thanks to Facebook, because 15 years ago I was posting, May the 4th be with you. Happy Star Wars Day. Ha ha ha. And people were like, oh, you're such a dork. And then like those same people now are like, Happy Star Wars Day. And I'm like, you weren't a Star Wars fan then. You don't get to say that now. And I realized that that's just ridiculous. We just need to be having fun with them. Right. And just, I don't care if you just saw Star Wars for the first time yesterday. What's wrong with you? There is something wrong there. You've missed out on something. Someone did not step in at the proper time and say, you need to see this. But
somebody did not love you.
Someone did not love you. I love you. Let's watch the rest of them. But even if that was the case, I should celebrate that with you and love the phenomenon with you. And even if you love episode 2, right?
Yep.
Hey, my sister watched them later in life, and that was one of my greatest wins. I think she hated them because I loved them.
Yeah.
She started watching Lord of the Rings, and she's like, I watched Star Wars again. She's like, they're actually pretty good. I'm like, yeah, it's deeper than just, things blowing up. There's a little more. So that's one of my personal wins. I planted the seed as a kid, and then I left her alone. But yeah, she came back to me and like divulged that she actually likes Star Wars. And I'm like, it's okay. You're welcome. You're still welcome to come into the fold. So.
And we won't tell anyone she told you that. So
that
stays between the three of us.
Just in here.
Any concluding thoughts? Thanks again for doing this.
Yeah. No, I want to say the same thing. Thank you. Had a great time.
Yeah.
Love talking about this. Yeah. Would love to do it again. Love to deep dive into other themes or ideas around it. But thank you so much for thinking of me, of us. It's been great.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, this has been a blast. Like I said, I could talk Star Wars. There was things I kept my mouth shut because I could keep going. And I don't feel like we even touched on the sequel trilogy, hardly at all, or the other movies. So yeah, anytime. You don't have to wait a whole year too. So if you're having rough
content, we'll come to you.
yeah. If you need more content, if you're having having a block there and need us. Yeah.
Great. Well, Thrilly, thank you again. It has been a pleasure. It has been a joy, and may the Force be with you.
Yes,
may the Force be with you.
Sorry about those technical glitches there with the dogs barking in the background and and my voice fading every once in a while. There were a few technical hiccups that honestly, I don't know how to fix. But this was such a great conversation anyway that I didn't really want to do anything to change that or to mess that up. So thanks for putting up with some of those glitches. Now, here I feel like I should mention that Dan is also a writer. He's even published a book. So it makes sense that he focuses on some of the behind the scenes stuff, right? And the stuff about the story development of the films. Pretty cool, right? I'll be sure to link to his book in the show notes. And this conversation was a lot of fun, and I hope y'all enjoyed it. I think it was the perfect wrap up to our Star Wars month series. So a big shout out to Dan and Will. Thank you again for making this happen. But also a big shout out to Tracy, Drew, and Lori for such a fun series. Such great conversations. I'm sure this will become an annual event. In fact, I'm already cooking up some ideas for Star Wars Month 2024. But have no fear, you don't have to wait until then to hear another episode of the Matt Dan Toddcast. I promise. More is on the way, including a life-changing conversation that you won't want to miss. Just hit that subscribe button or that follow button wherever you listen to your podcasts, and you will never miss an episode. Happy Orthodox Star Wars Day, everyone. Now, go watch a pod race or something. The Matt Dan Toddcast is hosted by, well, me. It's also written by, produced by, and promoted by, well, me. Special thanks to Spotify for podcasters for the cool music, though. And another special thanks to the kids from the youth group I led at Oak Landing Christian Church, who started calling me Matt Dan Todd more than 20 years ago. Y'all are great. I love seeing what wonderful ways you've changed the world over the years. I love you guys. Thanks again for listening. Don't forget to subscribe.